Hey there, it's Bills by the Numbers, presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Coming up in these three things, Buffalo is atop ESPN's Football Power Index of the 8 teams left in the playoffs. What are the projections saying? Does NFL playoff history prove that defense wins championships? And we talk with Chiefs radio analyst Damon Hughes about whether the Chiefs have emerging offensive players like the Bills do with Devin Singletary and Dawson Knox. Are you kicking or sticking? All right, thanks for checking in with us here at Bills by the Numbers. Bills Wall of Famer Steve Tasker and Bills insider Chris Brown here with you as always. And our rundown of these three things begins with ESPN's Football Power Index. Our good friend and analytics writer for ESPN.com, Seth Walder, wrote this week that the winner of the Bills-Chiefs division round playoff will win the Super Bowl, according to ESPN's Football Power Index. ESPN's FPI measures a team's true strength on a net points scale, and they use an expected points margin versus an average opponent on a neutral field. Huh? Yeah, don't ask me. I'm guessing what they're doing in the grand scheme of things there is weighing a team's strength by how effective they are against the average that the league has to offer. But anyway, their FPI is 8.8, the Bills. That's more than 2 points ahead of the Chiefs, but just 0.3 of a point ahead of the Bucs, who rank second. Kansas City is third. First question, Steve, how likely do you believe it is that the winner of Sunday's game between the Bills and Chiefs will represent the AFC in the Super Bowl?
I think it's a coin flip. Not that I'm not discounting it, but I don't know what Cincinnati and Tennessee are going to look like.
Okay.
And it's a week-to-week league.
That's fair.
And at this point of the season, all these teams are playing at a high level. The Bengals, the Titans, the Bills, the Chiefs, they're all playing at a really high level. So are the Niners, the Rams, the Packers, and the other team I can't think of. So, right? So they're all playing at a high level. And you don't know.
Yeah.
One week to week is I don't think there's any of these four teams that are going to say, I don't know if they've got any shot. They all have a shot at it. And I think to give one a favorite over, I'll say this. I think the two teams that are the most difficult to find your way around beating are the Bills and the Chiefs. No question about it. The Titans, I'm still not a believer in Tannehill. Their run game is good. Their defense is gifted. They've got some great weapons on the outside with Julio Jones and A.J. Brown. They've got some guys in Tennessee. They can really go. And they've got that power running game. They're getting some fresh guys back, and Derrick Henry looks like he's going to play at least a little bit. They're a problem and have been all year, and they're really well coached. So I don't know that you can say favorite or not. You got to see. You got to see what these teams play about, not only this weekend, but what it looks like going into the next weekend. It's a coin flip for me.
I would say in surveying what's left on the AFC landscape, it's like that old Sesame Street deal. One of these kids is doing his own thing, and that's the Titans.
Yes.
Because the other three teams are built similarly in many ways. The Chiefs, the Bills, and the Bengals, high-flying offenses, and for the most part, pretty good defenses. I mean, I think Cincinnati's defense is a little underrated because the offense gets all the attention. We know the Bills have the number one defense in football, and as we know, the Chiefs' defense has really come along here in the second half of the season, and the Titans are not the same. Their defensive strength is up front with Harold Landry, Bud Dupree, Jeffrey Simmons. Those are the horses. Those are the thoroughbreds. And Kevin Byard is a nice safety. He's a perennial Pro Bowl safety. Good. Those are your four premier defensive players for the Titans. They have premier players. You could argue that the Bills do not have premier players, maybe outside of Poyer and Hyde, especially with Tre'Davious White off the field, although some would argue Edmonds and Milano are pretty damn good as a linebacker tandem. And then you have the Chiefs, who have some premier defensive players, Chris Jones being the most notable among them, along with Tyrann Mathieu. How do you slice that? How do you dice all that up?
Right.
Because sometimes the collective whole is better than just having a couple of premier players like the Chiefs and the Titans do. And I think the Bills' defense is an example of that.
Right, I think so as well. And it could be, though, and you can get your mind right, is there anything to the question that because the Titans are different, they present different problems that teams aren't built to solve?
Possible.
That running game is a problem for people. Derrick Henry's a problem for people. Their defense is a problem for people. And Ryan Tannehill, I mean, with Julio Jones and A.J. Brown on the outside, they're two number ones. They really are. Now Julio's over the, he's on the backside of his career, and when he's healthy, he's a problem. But he's at that point of their career where
body's breaking down.
Guys get fragile. Nevertheless, you can discount the Tennessee Titans because they're different, or you can give them some kudos because they are.
Or because they're successful in a much different way than everybody else. Last part of this Football Power Index subject is it projects the Bucs and the Bills as the two most likely teams to reach the Super Bowl. Bucs at 38.3%, although we should note these computer simulations do not have knowledge of injuries like no Chris Godwin or Antonio Brown being released from the team. And the Bills are second at 35.9%. Moving away from the algorithms that I just listed, how difficult is this to project the Bills to the Super Bowl just with your eyeballs, knowing we have yet to even see Tennessee or Green Bay in playoff action yet? You kind of alluded to that already. But
it's pretty difficult. There's a lot of things that are going into this thing every week,
An injury, a key injury perhaps in the first playoff.
Let alone COVID. But
oh, yeah.
all of that stuff, all things being equal, you can rank these teams in your head, but I'll just say it one more time. You can have the better team, but you got to play well on that day. None of these teams are going to fall over, I don't think. You can't count on any of these 8 teams left in this thing to come out and not show up, like some of them didn't in the wild card round.
Yeah. That's
not going to happen in the division round.
See Dallas.
Right. See the Arizona Cardinals, the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
There's some of those teams that showed up that did not have a good day. You can't count on these teams not having a good day. They're going to play well and present problems. Now, that doesn't mean none of them are unbeatable. Half of them are going to be beatable. So, I think to project what's going to happen, I get it. You're going to take this algorithm and all the mathematics, and you're going to throw it all into a thing and say, here's where we're at. And you can rank these teams, the Bucs, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Packers, all of that stuff. They can go into the hopper and pull them out and rank them 1 through 16 or whatever.
Yeah.
But man, oh man,
good luck seeing that line up that way.
1 through 8 in this tournament they don't line up like that, and so I think it's hard to project. I think this weekend is going to be a weekend where I think others are going to have to play a role.
Yeah,
the others, not the Pat Mahomes, the Josh Allens, the Steph Diggs, the Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce's, and the Chris Godwins and the Tom Brady's. It's going to be the others.
Yeah, the role players.
The role players that are going to have to step up and make a difference.
I would tend to agree with that. I think the thing that, and I'm not worried about the Bills or Chiefs players getting caught up in this, but there are many national media people who are saying, wow, Chiefs and Bills should be the AFC Championship game, and we're getting it in the divisional round. So one of those two teams, whoever wins, is going to the Super Bowl. It's like it's almost a foregone conclusion in the minds of some, and that's a very dangerous game to play, as you pointed out already. But that seems to be the general consensus by outside observers. Chiefs-Bills are the two best teams in the AFC, as most people see it, and one of them is going to be knocked off here, making the path that much easier for either the Chiefs or the Titans, because now you only got to go through one of those teams to get to the big game instead of two. And that's what surprises me in the way the playoffs lined up, that some of those teams aren't ranked higher with a higher degree of probability to get to the Super Bowl, because you don't have to beat the Chiefs and the Bills if you're Cincinnati or the Titans. If you get past the divisional round, you only got to beat one of those teams to get to the Super Bowl, not two. I think that makes a huge difference in your probability of getting to the big game.
The fact that the seeding fell the way it did, and Kansas City and Buffalo are on the same side of the AFC bracket, it's a squasher for those people who want that rematch again.
Yeah.
But
they'll get it just a little bit earlier.
Yeah, that's just the way it's the way it goes. you're going to have to – I think it means that the league's going to play a weekend of playoff football without one of those teams next weekend.
Next up in these three things is the familiar phrase that defense wins championships. Is it accurate? Well, it seems to be if your defense is number one in total yards allowed, total points allowed, and passing yards allowed. See Buffalo. Buffalo, as we know, is number one defensively in all of those categories. They became the 9th team since 1990 to pull off that trifecta. 4 of the previous 8 teams to finish first defensively in points allowed, total yards allowed, and passing yards allowed won the Super Bowl that season. 4 of the 8 previous teams, the 96 Packers, the 02 Bucks, the 08 Steelers, and the 2013 Seahawks. A 5th team reached the Super Bowl but lost. That was the 2014 Seahawks, who ironically lost on an interception at the goal line at the end of the game. Do you like what history tells you, Steve, about Buffalo's defense as far as the playoff fortunes go?
Yeah. Good defenses help you win, and they travel well. It's nice to go on the road with a really good defense, knowing it's going to be tough for the home team to pour it on. Now, having said that, I mean you're playing the Kansas City Chiefs that, they churn out points. I don't know. There's whatever machine turns out points like
they do a good job.
It's hard to get an analogy for how fast
they were right
can
behind
score.
the Bills in scoring. Yeah,
they can go, man. They can really go. Yeah, but your defense does give you a chance. Now, there's also the thought that the Bills and the Patriots and the AFC East had an easier schedule getting through all of it this year. Now, the Bills had the most difficult. They played other division rivals and other division champions as the first place AFC East schedule.
Right.
But they're playing, they played the South, the AFC South, and the NFC South. So,
which are 2 down divisions. I think we can agree.
The Bucks are in that NFC South. The Saints are in the NFC South, but
the Saints aren't the Saints.
The Carolina Panthers, the Saints are having an off year.
And
Atlanta. So,
and then you got the Jags and the Texans.
Right.
It's just
so you can say, well, they padded their stats, on weak offenses and a lot of backup quarterbacks, and that helped them get up there. Nevertheless, they played good. They're a solid defense.
This is a different kind of challenge.
It's a different kind of challenge.
Agree on that.
It's a different kind of challenge. And so, the number one scoring defense, history says that it's better than having the number 10 or 16 defense like they did last year.
I mean, you can't, and that's the argument I was going to make. No matter how you feel about what the history says, at least you're going into the game with the best scoring defense that the league has to offer this year. Well, at least we're going into this game with no defense is better than ours. At least we're bringing that to the table.
And I'll say this too: it's a much better place to be than they were last year when they went in there.
Yes,
I think they're playing. They're getting better and better each week. They've played with more confidence each week since things came together in the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks of the season. They're playing with a lot more confidence. Their defense continues to play well, and now they're going into this game against Kansas City on the road in the playoffs after waiting for it for a year, better than they were 12 months ago.
And I would
as good as they were 12 months ago.
And I would argue the number one change in how this defense is different now in comparison to where they were in Week 5 is they are a more physical defensive front. I think they defend the run more effectively from a physical line of scrimmage standpoint, and they are a better pass rushing team. So I think the biggest strides they have made have been up front on the defensive line from even where they were in Week 5. In a game where they made some plays up front. Greg Rousseau with the tip ball for the interception against the Chiefs in Week 5. I mean, they made some plays defensively up front. I think they're even better there now going forward. The emergence of Harrison Phillips and Ed Oliver, who had not done that yet in Week 5.
Those two guys have elevated over the last month. Harrison Phillips is playing meaningful snaps, and he's playing very well. He's get a high effort. He's going down the line, making stops in the run game. He and Ed Oliver are playing better than they have at any point in their career. Yeah.
Our last of 3 things deals with Sunday's Bills-Chiefs divisional playoff in Kansas City. Last week against the Patriots, we saw how well-rounded Buffalo's offense is. No longer is there an over-reliance on Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley to give the passing game production. Third-year players Dawson Knox and Devin Singletary have become bona fide difference makers on offense, and they force opponents to pull their attention away from Diggs and Beasley. The question is, do you believe the Bills have similar, do you believe the Chiefs have similar emerging weapons for their passing game to pull attention away from Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce the way the Bills have?
Yeah, well, Nicole Hardman is a good player, and so is Byron Pringle. And they bring some things to the table. Now, I don't think – now, they are good options. Those guys can play. I don't think they're the same kind of thought process of defending them that you do the Bills. The Bills have got a very wide variety of skill sets, and I think the Chiefs all kind of throw into one mold. You know what I'm saying? Now, there are differences in among them, but they're all fast, and they're all wide receivers that are route runners. You've got, for Buffalo, you've got, McKenzie, you've got Cole Beasley, who's a separator, you've got Emmanuel Sanders, who's a separator in the end, and, of course, Diggs is the number one. Gabe Davis, who's a bigger target, who gets separation in the back end. And, of course, Dawson Knox, who is emerging as quite the weapon, along with Devin Singletary. I think there are a lot of similarities, but I think when you go deep down past the Diggs and the Cole Beasleys and the Travis Kelce's and the Tyreek Hills, you find differences in the others that are down below those guys. I think the guys that are behind Kelce and Hill for Kansas City are a little bit the same. I think there's a variety of skill sets when you go down that far with the Buffalo Bills.
Right, beyond skill set.
Which may make them predictable.
Right, well, yeah, maybe. Beyond the skill sets, and maybe this is because I've seen more of the Bills than the Chiefs, obviously, week over week, I just feel like Josh Allen has an inherent trust in every single guy that he throws to. And look, I know the first thing somebody's going to say is, well, quarterbacks have to trust their guys to make plays. Every quarterback trusts everybody on their offense. Well, they may say that publicly, but I think there is a genuine trust factor that exists from man 1 to man 8 in the pecking order of who he might be throwing to on a given Sunday. I don't know that that implicit trust exists for Patrick Mahomes and his entire receiving core. Nicole Hardman has been the victim of drops through the course of the year. His consistency, even as a third or fourth year player, still isn't there to the point where he can get on the field. And it's the reason why Byron Pringle has leapfrogged him in the pecking order of that receiving core. He has been more reliable. He has been kind of the true number 2 opposite Tyreek. And in essence, he's a 3 because Kelce might as well be a wide receiver with the way they use him in the offense. But Hardman is a guy that's hard to count on, hard to trust. And I think with the Bills receiving core, top to bottom, you've got playmakers that I think Josh Allen implicitly trusts. And I think in a tight spot, when you need a play and it can't be Diggs or it can't be Beasley, they've got other guys that I think Josh Allen is not going to hesitate to throw the football to, and I hope that's a difference maker for the Bills in this matchup. Okay, we'll get into this discussion more when we speak with former Chiefs receiver Danan Hughes, who is the color commentator on the Chiefs radio network, in just a minute. Bills fans, right now at FanDuel, new customers can get their first bet risk-free up to $1,000. Just sign up today by going to sportsbook.fanduel.com or by downloading the FanDuel Sportsbook app. FanDuel Sportsbook, an official partner of the Buffalo Bills. Time now, though, for the numbers game. And this week we challenged Steve with the best rushers in the league from week 15 through last week's wild card playoff round. So, Steve, this is tough. We're taking a snippet of the season, the top 10 rushers since week 15, who finished really strong. Steve, are you ready? Let's take your best swing at this.
All right, here we go. Let's see. I'm going to say, we'll start with Devin.
Devin Singletary is on the list, number 8 on the top 10. I'm just looking for you to get half of these. I'm not really looking for...
What about Debo?
Debo is not here for rushing yards, no.
What about a guy from Kansas City, Jerick McKinnon?
McKinnon only really played last week with a heavy workload, so no, he is not on that list.
All right, how about Okay, Jonathan Taylor.
Jonathan Taylor, number 2, 463 yards over the final 4 weeks and didn't even play last week.
Mixon.
Joe Mixon is not on this list.
Nick Chubb.
Nick Chubb, number 5.
Who have I got?
You've got Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb, and Devin Singletary among the top 10 rushers over the last 4 weeks of the regular season and the first week of the playoffs.
Najee Harris.
Najee Harris is on this list, number 6. With that offensive line and not much of a passing game, he still averaged 4.67 a carry. That's pretty good.
How about, who's the guy for the Niners? Mitchell? Elijah Mitchell?
Elijah Mitchell is not on this list. I need
In
you to
the
just get me
playoffs.
one more.
I'll say it wouldn't be Ezekiel Elliott.
It would not.
What
No.
about his running mate? the
Tony
other guy,
Pollard's a no as well.
Dalvin Cook.
Dalvin Cook not on this list, no. I'll give you one more kick at it. Give you one more guess, and then I'll help you fill in the rest here.
Oh, Damon Harris.
Damian Harris is not on this list either. So here's how it goes.
Does it got to be a playoff team?
Not necessarily, no, but there are, there's, you've named the 3 of the playoff or 2 of the playoff guys. There's only one more that was on this list. Or 2.
Clyde Edwards?
Or 2. Josh Jacobs, Las Vegas Raiders.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay, he was number 3. Sony Michel from the Rams. He was number 4. Had a strong finish to the season. Deonta Foreman, Tennessee Titans, who filled in for Derrick Henry.
Okay, yeah.
Strong finish to the season as
picked
well.
the Titan somewhere down the line.
Duke Johnson came on late for the Miami Dolphins and did really well down the stretch. Rex Burkhead in Houston. He had a gigantic game that one week.
Yeah. Did they sign him to an extension because of that?
I think so. Say what you will. And number 1, he was on a non-playoff team, but they ran the tar out of the ball.
Wait a minute. Let me just non-playoff team run.
NFC.
I will say Washington?
I don't think you're going to get it. Rashad Penny, Seattle Seahawks. He averaged 7.03 yards per carry over the last 4 games of the season. 534 yards in the last 4 games. And they did not make the playoffs, as we know. Top 10 rushers over the last month of the season. Something to keep an eye on if you're a fantasy player for early next year, provided some of those guys are in the same locations as they are right now. All right, good job, Steve. Not bad this week.
that was all right. That was a disappointing.
Well, they can't all be, grand slams. You know what I mean? Joining us now is former Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Danan Hughes, who is now the color analyst on the Chiefs radio network. Danan talks to us about how the Chiefs offense has morphed and changed this year and just what was done to rescue a Kansas City defense that was floundering in the middle of the season. Here is Danan. All right, Danan, so big game, probably the most anticipated of the entire weekend, especially because of the recent history between these two teams, not only this season, but in last year's AFC title game. What is the headline grabber for you in this matchup?
Oh, man, I think there's several storylines, guys. Obviously, the revenge factor because the Bills came in during the regular season. If Chiefs fans and Chiefs players want to reach for something, that was somewhat of an embarrassing loss at home on the same turf. But conversely, the Bills can argue the same thing from the AFC Championship last year. So I think that kind of nullifies itself. But both teams are playing at an amazing clip, did an outstanding job in the wild card round. But you got 2 of the top quarterbacks, playmakers in the league going against each other. It really comes down to me about protecting our home turf as the Chiefs. And then for the Bills, it's got to be, returning to where the madness happened. And I thought the Bills did an outstanding job setting the tempo when they came into Arrowhead earlier this season. It almost seemed like they made a concerted effort to be physical, wear some penalties early, to set the mindset and basically rerouting receivers. They were jamming and disrupting Travis Kelce. And I thought it was a great game plan. Like they seemed like they were willing to get as many penalties as possible early in the game, kind of knowing in the background that they probably wouldn't get those same penalty calls later in the game. And it worked in great fashion. So I think the Chiefs have to learn from that on our side, and we'll see what the Bills bring.
Yeah, this game also, the Chiefs are a much different football team. They're playing differently than they did early on in the season. They got it together in a big way. What is the most talking not X's and O's so much, but what about personnel? What's different this time around for the Chiefs, as well as what they're doing now that they didn't do X's and O's wise?
Yeah, so on our defense, if I had to vote for an MVP for our defense, and I think it really comes down to our defense. In that first matchup, we had some offensive blunders. We weren't really hitting our stride offensively. I thought Patrick Mahomes was trying too hard early in the season, as opposed to just being the playmaker that he's been. But from a personnel perspective, to me, the defensive MVP of this team is Melvin Ingram. His acquisition in the trade from the Pittsburgh Steelers gave a jolt to this defense like I haven't seen in a long time around here. Melvin Ingram has been an outstanding addition. He's allowed Chris Jones to go back to his natural position in the interior defensive line. And he just plays with a different kind of energy that I think has permeated across this defense. So when you're talking about what's different, to me, that's the number one thing that jumps out, is that Melvin Ingram has added an infusion of energy and playmaking ability that we desperately needed. I mean, the stats don't tell the true tale of what he's and how he's impacted this team.
And then on the offensive side, Danan, I mean, here in Buffalo, Dawson Knox and Devin Singletary are two third-year players that kind of emerged as bona fide difference makers and have diversified Buffalo's offense. From the outside looking in, it would appear that Byron Pringle is a third-year player that has done that for the Kansas City offense. I mean, last 4 weeks of the regular season alone, here are your targets on offense, your leading targets in the passing game. Tyreek Hill with 28, Travis Kelce with 25, Byron Pringle with 23. I mean, he's right there. Can you just speak to his emergence and how he has diversified Kansas City's passing game?
You know, it's interesting because I played against Steve Tasker. He was a wide receiver, but made his bones in special teams, one of the greatest to ever play in special teams. Matter of fact, Steve, right before this podcast, I was watching the Joe Montana documentary. And fortunately, I didn't get to the AFC Championship in '94 because I probably would have thrown my remote at the TV. But
Yeah.
But I'll say this about Byron Pringle, and Steve, you know this. When you make your bones in the league as a special teams guy, I was that guy as well. You feel like you can still contribute as a wide receiver. But the toughest hurdle to get over is usually the coaches not seeing you as a special teams guy, but seeing you as a viable wide receiver. So that has been an uphill battle for Byron Pringle. He's a bigger guy. He's physical. He loves special teams. He's been really good at it, returning the ball as well as out at the gunner position. And it took some time, I believe, for this Chiefs offense to recognize that he can be a true number two. We went and got Josh Gordon, tried to get him indoctrinated into this offense to be a number two receiver. Nicole Hardman, tried to get him as well. And neither guy really worked out. Demarcus Robinson, the same thing. And I think it's really over this last month come down to Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid saying, hey, this number 13, this Byron Pringle kid, he can be that guy. And when Tyreek Hill was down with a heel injury in Denver and Travis Kelce was out against the Steelers, you needed somebody to step up. And it's great to see that kind of blue-collar guy that kind of played just like Steve and I be able to get his opportunity on offense and make the best of it. He's a Kansas State kid, so he's a local guy, and he's really taken advantage of his opportunities.
And one of the things about that as well, and I remember going through that as with a special teams guy, there are probably guys on the right, maybe even Mahomes himself. Sometimes the players see stuff in practice that the coaches ain't watching for. And a guy like Pringle, and I know this happened to me, when he got on the field, Mahomes already knew the guy. Mahomes
Yeah.
has no problem throwing the football. So when the guy finally gets on the field, he gets a bump right away because Mahomes is already comfortable with the guy. No, despite what Andy Reid or Bieniemy think about him, Mahomes has been thrown to the guy, so he knows. And I think it's shocking, not just coaches it's a pleasant surprise, but for fans, they're like, wow, this guy's really good. They forget that Mahomes knows the guy, feels comfortable with him, and Pringle, right when he got in, started getting snaps. Mahomes had no problem throwing him the ball. And I think that's something that gets lost in the shuffle when you got a great quarterback who watches stuff like that.
Sometimes it's just a reality moment. You know as well as I do, coaches, there are times where coaches can overcook things and overthink things. And the guy could be right in front of your face, and you could be, it's like the little kid that's trying to, get into the game. He's like jumping up in front of you as dad, I can make the play, and you're still looking for the bigger kid that's around that you can go and get. Byron Pringle has been that guy. If you go back to the first Super Bowl run in 2019, one of the biggest plays of the season was when we were playing at Detroit, and Byron Pringle took a heck of a hit on a ball he caught. He actually got yardage after contact and fell inside the 5-yard line on a crucial down. To me, it showed his toughness, but then automatically your mindset thought, okay, well, he's our special teams guy. He's our kickoff return guy. He's our gunner. He can't be our wide receiver. And that's been a kind of a tug of war for a while. So I think it's one of the great stories. If we're able to move forward and get to a third straight Super Bowl, to me, one of the great stories of this season outside of Melvin Ingram is the emergence as a wide receiver for Byron Pringle.
Yeah, he's kind of like Isaiah McKenzie's been here for Buffalo. He's kind of emerged on the offensive side of the ball at the receiver position in what's a very deep receiving core as well. The other guy who's kind of shown up to the party late here for the Chiefs is Jerick McKinnon. We know Clyde Edwards-Helaire was down last week. Don't know what his status is going forward. If you can shed any light on that, we welcome it. But I don't know if his snap count's going to be what it usually is with the juice that Jerick McKinnon brings to that backfield. We know Andy Reid loves putting as much speed on the field as possible. Jerick McKinnon popped watching that game last week. What do you see his role being going forward?
I don't see any reason why it should diminish. Yeah, you'd love to have Clyde Edwards-Helaire back. And again, we've been around this game of football for a long time. Andy Reid, when he was with the Eagles, he always had a 1-2 punch. It was never really about a bell cow. It was always Deuce Staley, Brian Westbrook, LaShawn McCoy. You can go through the list. There's always seemed to be that 1-2 punch, even when it was with the Eagles. Going back to our Super Bowl run, nobody heard of Damian Williams prior to that playoff run back in 2019, 2020. And now we're getting the same kind of situation with Darrell Williams and now Jerick McKinnon. He's a smaller guy, and he gets low center of gravity. He gets behind his big body blockers, and you lose him. And he's got a great burst. He hadn't had a whole bunch of opportunities this year, so he's got fresh legs. He came off of an injury where he was out for several weeks, and it's just about who's hot right now. And I think it's a testament to the evaluation process with Brett Veach, Eric Bieniemy, and Andy Reid. But right now, he's the hot hand. I don't see why you would try to reinvent the wheel when you got a guy that's done what he's done over these last 2 weeks. He basically helped win the game against the Denver Broncos 2 weeks ago, and he didn't slow down last week.
Super. Danan, listen, thanks much for the time. We purposely did not bring up the 93 AFC Championship game. You brought it up, so that's on you, because Steve is, he's a gentleman and a scholar.
Yeah, plus I can't remember that far back, so.
Appreciate the time, Danan, as always.
Danan.
Thanks
Appreciate
very
you,
much.
man.
We'll see you out there in KC.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
All right, good conversation there with Damon Hughes. Our final reminder, the NFL playoffs are in full gear, and everyone can get in on the action with a risk-free bet on FanDuel Sportsbook. Download the app today and make every moment more. We close with our one burning question this week with the divisional playoff front and center between the Bills and the Chiefs. Our question is, who has more pressure on them in this game? Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen?
I think it's Josh. Mahomes is MVP, Super Bowl MVP, World Championship, a couple of straight AFC titles, and trying to go back to their third straight Super Bowl. Pat, he's the standard. So I think Josh, if he wants to assume that role, he's got to beat him.
Yeah.
He's got to beat him in this game, in these games like these. Josh is still, because of the way his career started and where he was in the draft and what people thought about him coming out, he still has a lot of baggage that people attribute to him, even though he doesn't deserve it.
Right.
And there are still people bringing up a play the lateral play in the Houston playoff game in 2018, the one, that when they were trying to come back and win, when the team blew a 16-0 lead. That was, Josh still carries that around for some people because they don't watch him play every week.
No.
So, and that's so far in the rearview mirror, and that's not even, that's like another guy. So, yes, I think Josh has more, and I don't know about more pressure, but I certainly think Josh Allen has more to gain through this victory than Pat Mahomes has to lose through this victory.
Right, and I would agree that Josh Allen does have more pressure because this is, can you get over the hump? Can you get by the team that's been standing in your way each of the last 2 seasons? And as much as the Bills are built to be a perennial contender by Brandon Beane and head coach Sean McDermott, we don't have to remind anybody there are no guarantees that you're going to get back to the same spot and get a second crack. Here is your second crack at the team that bounced you and cost you a Super Bowl berth last year. So the pressure is on him in a big way. My hope is he can compartmentalize that and just focus on the game. Just put all that other garbage to the side, because we know when some of those things affect him, that's when, as you say sometimes, you got to peel Josh off the ceiling because he's running too hot.
Right.
And then there's rocket balls flying around and
You'd like to
stuff
think
like that.
with this game, the way he played this last week, the amount of pressure that was on him. Of course, it was a home game, and the crowd hyped up. And,
and it got off to a very good start. That helps kind of calm your nerves a little bit.
Yeah, but the start was him.
Mm-hmm.
Him going whatever he did, went 4 for 5 or 5 for whatever it was, 6 for 8 on the first drive or whatever it was. That was him getting off to a nice start. That speaks to how things maybe have changed for him. But that game last weekend, Saturday night in Buffalo against the Patriots in the wild card round of the playoffs, would have been the textbook spot for him to be. You'd have to peel him off the ceiling at home against a team that you've had some success against, but also one of those teams that's you don't know about. They got a great defense. So I think that proves how, with the step-by-step, that he's got it in him to just relax and play. But, yeah, it's he'll do a lot of things for his reputation around the casual fans around the league this weekend. Because now, the time we're taping this, late in the week, right before the division round against the Chiefs, just now, national media analysts are going back and taking a hard look at the game that he had against the Patriots, and now they're coming out and going, oh my gosh, did you see that? Did you really look at that game? And when they study the film, the guy was perfect.
Right.
He didn't throw an incomplete pass for the last 2 3/4 quarters of that game. It was just outside the first quarter was the last time he threw an incomplete pass.
Yeah.
He was unbelievable. Now they're just catching up to that.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that the game against the Chiefs will not be as easy as that one was. And if there's a battle that Josh has waged in his young career, it is with himself and his own hyper-competitive nature, which you want in a quarterback, and any coach will tell you, they'd rather have a guy they've got to tell to ease off the gas than to have to kick in the pants to get him going.
Right.
They would rather have the latter, or the former rather than the latter. Josh has worked very hard to keep that under control while still performing at his best. But there is this inherent desire when things might be a little wonky at the start of a game to try to kickstart his team by doing something spectacular. And sometimes that doesn't always work. And that can sometimes get him into trouble. I think even in the last quarter of the season, he has done a far better job of keeping that under control in a way that is still productive for his football team. And it is my hope that he can do that again, even if the game against the Chiefs doesn't get off to as perfect a start as the wild card game did against the Patriots.
And I think the coaches are aware of it, so are his teammates. I mean, they, all the way from Josh listening to Frank Sinatra on his playlist beforehand, that if Brian Dable pops on the headset and starts, giving him the playlist, he can always throw in that sentence like, you just take what they give you, just relax.
Yep.
Hey, don't be afraid to check this down. Or, hey, after this play, don't take this sack here, just relax. You don't have to make this play. Or saying, listen, make sure you just live to fight another day if this doesn't work out,
And I think those are the lessons that he has learned from the Houston playoff game in 2019, from the AFC Championship game last year. Hopefully all of those lessons are applied in what is another breakthrough performance for Josh against the Chiefs. That'll do it for this edition of Bills by the Numbers. Be sure to subscribe so you know when our next episode is ready for you. And remember, when you need to know about the Bills, you need to check Bills by the Numbers. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. We'll catch you next week, everybody.